be in the background. Thank you to everybody who's joining, and please take it away. Yes, Lauren, there is a recording. Here's the, it's on the Pardot Geeks blog. There's only been one so far for the
Kickoff.
session that I did for evaluation. So I will put the link here.
Yeah, so we're going to talk kind of in depth about Pardot, what a consultant needs to know about email. And Becca and I kind of structured this with lots of similar questions to what you might see on the exam. So I don't know, Ben, I didn't get to join your session last time, mea culpa. But something I'd like to tell people about the exams. The specialist exam is very, how do you navigate? What do you click? Where do you go to find things? It's very tactical. The consultant exam is very scenario based. So your customer comes to you with this kind of complicated thing. What do you do? What do you tell them? And the questions on the consultant exam are long paragraphs, and the answers are frequently wordy. Our example questions are not quite so long as what you'll
No.
see in the actual exam. Um,
And I
but
feel like theirs are meant to trip you up,
yes,
um, in true
so
Salesforce fashion, because they're like, what do you do? What are the first three things you do? And maybe it
yeah,
might even need to be in order, and it could be the same things on, 3 out of 4 of the
yeah.
questions, and it's just looking at what you have to do first. So,
So hopefully, if you're sitting the consultant's exam, you have a decent amount of hands-on with Pardot and can kind of eliminate one or more possible. They're all multiple choice questions with like four choices. Sometimes they'll say pick two. Sometimes they'll say pick three. Sometimes they'll say pick one. If you can eliminate questions, something you can say, this is obviously wrong. That's one test taking strategy I highly recommend. And then sometimes your answers may not always be exactly right, especially if you're a longtime user like me or Becca. You might be like, well, they're not 100% right, but this is the closest. I recommend picking that one most of the
yeah. So
time.
put on your Salesforce wants me to do this way hat, and don't
Yes.
say this is how I would do it and all these answers are wrong. Just go, what does Salesforce want me to say?
Yes.
And think about it that way.
Um,
So,
and then to Ben's session, I know that you talked, Ben, about like how do you approach digging into the questions. That's a great thing to take through all of your test taking and being a consultant, because Trailhead is all well and good because it'll give you a video of like somebody giving you very clear directions to execute X, Y, and Z and do it in these steps. Being consultant is not like that. And we're going to give you some actual questions Becca and I have had over the years.
mhm,
And we can kind of laugh about them as we go. But they are very representative about what you will actually get from a client, especially about the
yeah.
topic of email. So why don't we dive in? Um, so, Becca?
Yeah. So I am Becca Miller. I work at Rose Tree Solutions as a senior Salesforce consultant and Pardot consultant. I've been in the ecosystem for about 8 years. I started the Pardot user group in Houston, run the Houston user group and Salesforce Saturdays in Houston. I've done God, probably over 100 Salesforce implementations, 50, probably 55-ish. I was counting. That's how I know that. Pardot projects, and yeah, lots of migrations from other systems. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So Laura Black, my name is spelled weird. I go by Pardot Pro on Twitter. So I am not in consulting anymore. I did spend a couple years in consulting, but my background is I've been a Pardot end user since late 2011. So I've been in the Pardot world for a long time. I currently co-host the Austin Pardot user group. We're pretty much virtual ever since the pandemic. It's worked out pretty well. Happy to have anybody drop in on the Austin user group sessions. If you see something we post that's virtual, please feel free to jump in. I spent a couple years doing Pardot consulting, and I decided that I like being client side a little more. I get to dive into the back end and the nitty gritty, and I just really enjoy teaching people about Pardot. And my goal that didn't work well for me as a consultant is I wanted everyone to like Pardot as much as I do, and that's not a realistic goal for a consultant. Like in consulting, it's really about like teaching people. People are not as invested into technology as I am. So
Well, and you'll have people that are migrating from other systems that they love. And what
yeah,
happens is Salesforce will sell Salesforce or Sales Cloud to a customer, and then they'll throw in Pardot. Just bump up the price a little bit and go, look what you got. And
yeah,
the person signing the contract's like, yeah. They just throw it on marketing. And so
yeah. That
they're
happens.
usually a little upset when the
And
consultant
there,
gets
you know,
them.
Pardot works differently than Marketo, works differently than HubSpot. I'm working with an agency at my day job where, you know, their person looking at our Pardot account, he's actually very experienced in HubSpot, and so he's very confused about things like campaigns and why aren't they parent-child. I'm like, well, they are in Salesforce, for example. So there's quirks, but let's dive in. I think to like this is if you haven't seen the Pardot exam guide, I highly recommend you go visit it. It tells you what are the sections in the certification exam. Um, Email marketing is 10%. And every little section has like this little blurb that, why don't we look at what that says about email marketing, Becca? It
Oh,
says,
you mean on the next slide?
yeah, on the next slide. It
All right.
says, this is very helpful. It's 10% of your exam. Apply email marketing standards and best practices to customer business needs, which is
Not helpful.
just the most obnoxious statement.
It's basically you need to know everything about email marketing.
Yeah. So questions that are likely to appear on the exam are things about what you'll see us kind of addressing. Like there's the Pardot email builders, which and it gets down to which tool do you use, but really it's around which do you recommend as the consultant. You know, again, you come to a meeting with a client's got problems, and I've kind of condensed them down to like these common things. Why do we have so many bouncing emails? People aren't subscribing and we need them to stop, you know. So we're going to kind of talk about not just how do you answer this question. We're not just going to look at the question. We're going to talk about like when you have so many bouncing emails, what do you actually need to look at to come up with a solution? So let's kind of dive in to these things. So again, I've summarized this into why do we have so many bouncing emails? And this is a loaded question. And there are so many reasons. Your client's looking to you to come up with an action plan. And I think that's something that will guide you well as a consultant is people don't necessarily want you to bring them problems. They want you to say like, hey, here's this, but here's how we can handle it. They want solutions. So come to consulting and come to the exam with, this is what I would do to come to my client with a solution and what I would recommend. So let's keep going. So bouncing emails. So off the bat, if you've taken your specialist cert, and you need to do your specialist cert before you can sit your consultant exam, you should know what the email authentication is, the SPF, DKIM, that kind of stuff. Um, but beyond that, you know, do they have bouncing emails because they're transitioning from from a different platform into Pardot, and they had all these unsubscribes and bounces and opt-outs from the other system, and they didn't bring any of that data into Pardot? You can bring that data into Pardot with what's called the historical import. So you should really look into your client's Pardot import page, see if somebody did a giant import where a bunch of people were marked as opted out. If you don't see that, likely that historical import was never done. So it's definitely time to recommend that your client see if they can get that data from the other system and put it into Pardot even today. But going into like other things, like honestly, we never like to admit it, but clients buy lists all the time, right? So is this list a terrible list with a high bounce percent because they bought it from some low quality list vendor? Very possible. I will tell you what happens. Uh, but also looking at historical trends on their emails. Is this an outlier? Do they have a history of sending email and they don't have huge bounce rates? And this is an outlier? Or do they have a long history of sending emails with like really high bounce rates and really bad like email engagement statistics? So these are the things you kind of want to look at. You can say it's not a quick like one and done, you know, we have a solution. Anything to add, Becca? What else to look into?
For bouncing emails,
Yeah,
mm,
I think
just
that's most of it.
yeah, just keep your. I mean, most of the time it's just because the data is bad, or they have a practice, which your data is bad, in Salesforce of requiring an email to save a record in Salesforce. If the person doesn't know the email address, they'll just put in gibberish. And of
Yep.
course, that's bad. So then that's going to go into Pardot and it's going to bounce.
Right.
So no email is better than a bad email.
Yes. One company I used to work for, they would say like no@no.com for thousands of records. And they had all bounced previously, so they were all marked as unmailable, so they didn't cause me problems. But yeah, that creates a prospect record in Pardot, and they can get dumped into recipient lists and stuff automatically. So
And then if you think about it, if we'll get to this later, but if you're not cleaning up that email in those prospects in Pardot, then they're also bogging down your system. So,
yeah,
but that's not a bouncing email
yeah.
thing.
So let's do what we have next. So, oh yeah, the other things to check as the consultant is, the actual list they were sending to. So once you've evaluated and like you kind of have a gut feel now for, is this an ongoing problem or is this a standalone problem? How big was this email list? Um, do they traditionally send to like 500 people and now this list was 20,000? Like that's an outlier, right? So you kind of need to do some digging on not just where they got it, but did this have any suppression lists on it? So, and then when you see this discrepancy in list sizes, is it because they have a new marketing manager who doesn't really understand what's going on? The previous person was really targeting in their lists to, this email is about see our webinar about this very specific topic. And the list that they pulled this time is like everybody in the database, where previously they were pulling in only like the decision makers into these much smaller lists, right? So, kind of talking about the actual recipient list, the suppression lists, but other things that they might have changed in the back end, like did the company just recently get acquired and they pulled in like a subsidiary subscribers and that subsidiary hasn't cleaned their list either. um, did they change their company name, change their company email domain? Frankly, did they just start using Pardot because again in this transition, like maybe they didn't do their historical import? If it's a really big list, they do their IP warming, which we'll kind of talk about later. So lots of things as a consultant. It's not just really cut and dried and being like, here's what you need to do. Sometimes, and hopefully more often, you do have those where it's a pretty clear reason. But honestly, email bouncing, like I said, is a loaded question, and there's a lot to investigate. So then we have some sample questions, I think. So
So how can
yes,
how
go
can
ahead.
you help them? You always need to adhere to best practices. Having people opt into your lists and running a permission pass on them keeps them, your recipients, knowing that you're going to be emailing them. Um, so they're opening them, they're not unsubscribing.
Yeah. And I
Um,
kind of summarize this as my third bullet point is that like as an email marketer or in the space, you want to send email that people want to receive. And that really comes down to targeting your lists well, not doing the spray and pray to 20,000 people, but nailing down the recipient list to people who are actually going to get benefit from this. Like, you don't need to send a webinar invitation to the summer intern or the AP clerk, unless that's your target audience, right? If you are trying to reach sales leaders, you should be segmenting your list so that, like, hey, their job title indicates they're in sales, and the recipient list should reflect that. You don't need, if you know your ICP, your ideal customer profile, you know which departments people work in, you don't need to email to the other departments. So really you want to send email people want to receive and send it to the people who want to receive it. Otherwise you get lots of spam reports, bounces, everything.
which I've also seen a company that was trying to do ABM, had a new marketing person come in, looked into Salesforce, looked at, I guess, her own list of companies that she
Right.
liked to work with, and then took those companies and sent them to the Pardot admin and said, please email all of these companies. So if he'd done exactly what she said, he would have had to gone back into Salesforce and look up all the people. I mean, you could run a
Yeah.
dynamic list in Pardot and say if account is this, then put them on the list. But guess what you're going to end up with? The
I
the
mean,
summer
that might be
interns, the
like, yeah,
counting,
the
people you
executive
don't want to be
assistant.
emailing,
Yeah.
and those people will opt out, and you don't want that.
And really, bouncing, and also our next topic, which is about unsubscribing. It's really about, um, Gmail. We all hopefully have familiarity with Gmail. Gmail segments your emails into like the promotions tab and also the inbox. And this gets to your deliverability concept too, and also your unsubscribe rate is, um, when you send people email that they want, you send them email that they move to their inbox and that they click and engage with. And Gmail and all those other spam tools are listening for those engagements. When you engage with, when your recipients engage with your emails, Gmail looks at that behavior over time and is like, oh, this company sends email that's not spam. I'm not going to put it in the promotions folder. I'm going to get it in the inbox. So you have fewer bounces because Gmail and other tools like that respect you as a sender. So best practices are obnoxious to try and get a client to do, but always be recommending them because it is in everyone's best interest. So sample question. So this is a little bit exaggerated, but not too far. So I had a client call me up and was like, "Hey, our bounce rate is, off the wall. So 70% bounce rate. I mean, 70% deliverability rate, which means a 30% bounce rate." And so Pardot sends a nastygram being like, "Hey, your email had too many bounces. Um, you need to reply to us and tell us XYZ. Otherwise, if you don't reply to us, we're going to shut off your ability to send email." So this is not just like a what if concept. This is a real problem. So what advice do you give a client who has had a bad email send like this? And pick two. So this is a common format for a Salesforce exam. Um, so again, to my point of like, what can you eliminate kind of quickly? Well, I would say you can't ignore the email because it definitely means something. I would also say, the second from the last, never send email through Pardot again is a bad answer because this whole thing is Pardot is about sending email. So that leaves you your first two as your options. So verify the source of this list. Are these people who opted in to receive email from you? If they're not, you probably want to point out to the client that like this is a result of using an unopted in list. Like a list of people who are not opted in is you get a lot of bounces and it hurts your email deliverability rates. And then I would highly recommend to the client that you engage a system like Never Bounce is a really common one in the industry where it can tell you, it goes out and it pings the DNS records that have to do with mail. Like, does a mail record exist for this company? If not, it means this company is probably out of business. Um, so engaging a list cleaning service, you can pay for different levels of list cleaning services, but they can, give you different value for it. So like some list cleaning services can tell you if this person works for this company, and that you pay more for that. Uh, Other list services can tell you like, oh, a mail record exists and the domain exists, or the domain doesn't exist. And you pay less for that because you're not getting down to the nitty gritty person. So decide what you want to pay for. But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to figure out if the list is an opted in list, clean your list, clean your database.
And if you
So
found a list service that's fantastic, I'm sure there's people that would like to hear from you. But I've
yeah.
had customers that were so fully invested in the list that they were buying. And they were like, no, these are good. We know what they're interested in. We know their income. We know all these things. We're going to target our list that we're building off of the list that we just bought. And so the people that we are sending this email to are going to want to hear from us. They are our target audience. They're
Right.
perfect for us. They still bought this list.
Yeah.
So they
It's
one
questionable.
customer, they sent this very targeted list. They had graded all, I mean, they went through grading like you wouldn't believe in Pardot, which was a feat, and I was really proud of her for building it out. Um, but in the end, they might have gotten like 2 clicks off the whole engagement studio program, and it was so thorough and beautiful, and it just they started with a purchase list. So I mean, Pardot tells you not to do it, and
Hmm.
after 8 years of consulting for Pardot, I would totally agree.
Yeah.
Purchase lists are really just not the way to go.
But
You
some
can
people have
disagree,
to
it's
learn that the
okay.
hard way. Some people
Yeah,
just have
they
to learn that the hard
totally
way.
learned that the hard way, so, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah,
how can we stop people from unsubscribing?
this is literally like everybody wants to stop people from unsubscribing.
But do you really want them to stay? You don't want to lose your prospects, but people move.
I've had
They
people
might
pass
not be in
away.
that industry anymore.
Yeah. Like people retire, they're out of office bounces. There's like, hey, I've retired from such and such company. Like, attrition for your list is normal. And it does everybody favors when clients start realizing that. I'm not kidding that I've had people like, hey, so and so has passed away, and now, so now you want to update your database to indicate that, like, no, don't email these people. So some amount of unsubscribing is normal. Um, Again, if you send an email and you get like, I think it's like a 10% unsubscribe rate, Pardot will send you nasty grams about, you have such a high unsubscribe rate here, like you did something wrong. So again, like this is a very important topic, but if people are unsubscribing, do you actually want to keep them? Maybe they're unsubscribing because they've gone with a competitor. Maybe they're unsubscribing because they don't work in your line of business anymore. Maybe they're
or
unsubscribing because you bought a list,
or you email them too much.
or you email them too much. So let's talk about like what can we actually do. So action items for you as a consultant. First off, I always stop and I look at their emails and I'm like, okay, Pardot requires you to have in a link at the bottom of every email for unsubscribe or email preference center. Um, Fun fact, it does not have to be the unsubscribe link. It can be a link to the email preference center instead of the unsubscribe link.
Which
So
includes, when you get there, has an
yeah,
unsubscribe link in it, so
yeah.
you're covered.
So if your emails are being sent out with only the unsubscribe link, you're losing out on an opportunity to let people downgrade themselves. Um, so when we talk about that, then we ask, is your email preference center even set up? And a lot of times people are like, what's an email preference center? Um, and the difference is that instead of letting people globally opt out from everything by unsubscribing, you could show them the email preference center and say, hey, I don't want as many emails, or I only want emails on these topics. Um, and then they stay mailable. Um, and they just kind of unsubscribe from the things they don't want to hear about, but they stay subscribed to you in general. Um, Other things are there is a two-step unsubscribe that you can configure in the settings of Pardot. And then frankly, again, it comes back to like send email that people want to receive. So what kinds of emails are they sending? And do they have a high unsubscribe rate? Is this an outlier? This kind of gets back to list quality again.
And I see
So
a question in the chat that says, is that only in America for unsubscribe / email preference center based in the UK? I would say, no, it's not only in the United
yeah,
States. I'm not in the UK, but um,
yeah. So this is a
GDP,
global
I was gonna
setting.
say
Yeah,
there's Castle in
yeah.
Canada and GDPR in
Yeah, so this is definitely getting like
Europe.
down into the weeds of topics. We could definitely kind of a whole session on GDPR and like best
Totally.
practices, which won't really be on your exam, so don't worry about that. But functionally, your emails must link to either the unsubscribe page, so it's a one-step unsubscribe, or a two-step unsubscribe if you set that up, or they can link to the email preference center. The requirement is globally that your email preference center must have a global opt-out thing on it.
So
We're talking about like, yeah,
what will happen if you build an email that doesn't have it? You won't be able to save it. You'll
yeah.
get an error and it'll tell you that you have to have the link
Yeah, so
in your email.
functionally, you probably, if you've had some hands-on with Pardot, you've had that like nasty red pop-up appear that like you must include a link in the bottom. Um, so one of the things that like if you're sending to a Gmail audience, Gmail puts at the top of your emails like, would you like to unsubscribe from this? And it'll actually like grab the link from the bottom and like bring it up to the very top of the email. So Gmail is sort of like working against you, but it's also protecting their end users. It's sort of this mess, right? So what if instead of putting the unsubscribe link in your email, you link them instead to the email preference center? Then you can't just one click unsubscribe, lose them globally. Now you give them an option to land on a page and make an actual decision. Because you'd be surprised how many people like change from globally opting out to like, oh, I just want to not get as many emails. So yeah, this function exists for everyone globally across Pardot. You can definitely set it up. Let's go. And here's a great thing to think too is like to this question of are we emailing them too much? What is too much? So you can create a dynamic list in Pardot that is simply prospect has been emailed blank in the last blank days. And usually I would say like 3 times in the last 2 weeks is maybe too much. You can do whatever you think is enough. So create this dynamic list and put that dynamic list on every single one of your email sends, all of your nurture programs in Engagement Studio, all of your newsletter e-blasts. Put that as a suppression list everywhere you're sending email from. And if they have received an email from you through Pardot in this time period, they will be suppressed from the send. If it's Engagement Studio, it'll like wait to send them the engagement emails until they fall off that suppression list. So you space it out more. And yeah, getting down to, are we emailing them too much? Are you segmenting your list? Are you sending every email to everyone? Bad habits again. So really, you can slow the tide of unsubscribes by sending people what they want to receive. So yes.
Oh, we already talked about this.
We talked about this a little bit, which is cool. But it is a point here at the bottom I put in, review the emails with your worst unsubscribe rates. Like, okay, if you got a nasty gram from Pardot, this one obviously had a high unsubscribe rate, but like look across the history of the account. Do they send emails and they have 3% unsubscribe rates? That's really pretty high. It's higher than I would want traditionally. So what types of emails are they sending? Again, look at the recipients, everything with that. So everything you kind of see like ties together and merges together.
Yeah, and another thing I would do is not just create the email preference center with your public lists, but use those to send your emails.
Yes,
I've
100%.
had clients that build the email preference center out, and then
Don't use
again
that as your
they're
recipient list.
using that all prospects list to send their emails. It kind of negates the entire purpose of the email preference center.
100%. So this might be a training issue, might be some other issues. But lots of things to think about as a consultant and advising in advising your clients. I cannot talk.
Okay, so I'll talk.
Yeah,
Your
go for it.
client comes to a meeting and tells you that they're having a very high unsubscribe rate when they send their email newsletters. What do you recommend? So pick 2 here. Again, back to the deleting the one that's obvious. So we've got stop sending newsletters because nobody reads them anyway. Probably not your answer. Switch to social media posting instead of newsletters. No. Advise them to perform a permission pass on all subscribers. That definitely would be good because then you know that they want your emails and you have the right email address also. And tell them to create a subset of their newsletter subscribers and only send the newsletter to the most engaged users. You can do that. If you're having people actually subscribe to the newsletter, then you definitely know that they want it, or at one point they did want it. So it will be a more successful list if people have opted into receiving that specific type of email.
And when I say here, create a subset of your newsletter subscribers and only send to their most engaged users. Let's say your entire newsletter list is 60,000 people, but you then run a second dynamic list in Pardot that is like, you are a member of the list, newsletter subscribers, and your prospect time last activity days ago is greater than 3. So like you're getting to this is a messy dynamic list a little bit, but you have to understand the Pardot terminology here. So last activity days ago is less than 3 is like they had a Pardot activity, and in Pardot activity is things like a form fill, you're cookied and you visit a web page, or you click through an email. So we want to get a subset of our newsletter subscribers. They're a member of the newsletters list and they have last been active some days ago. Maybe it's 30 days ago, maybe it's 60 days ago. So instead of sending to your all newsletters list or your all list, let's get it down to my active people who have engaged with me in the last X number of days. Your email sending and engagement rates, your recipient list size will go down, but your engagement rates will go through the roof when you send it to the people who are engaging with you. So yeah. lots of things to think about.
Your client wants to ensure they are not overmailing and spamming their customers. What do you recommend? I have definitely had customers that just don't worry about it. If they don't want your emails, they'll unsubscribe. But then you've got if you get over 10% unsubscribes or opt-outs on your email, you'll get the nasty gram from Pardot. You don't want that. Ask your sales reps who they think you shouldn't email and create a static list of those prospects. Um, sorry. Create a do not email more than once in 4 days list. This goes back to what we were just talking about. You can build it so that it's, I don't want to email them more than once in 3 days, or more than twice in 2 weeks, or more than 3 times in 2 weeks, and use that dynamic list as your suppression list. Or create a custom checkbox in Salesforce for the sales reps to let you know when a customer complains about receiving too many emails, and then put that on a suppression list. So
The last one is
obviously
not
this,
bad exactly, but it's not as encompassing enough to solve your problem here. So,
no.
especially since we spent so much time speaking about the dynamic list, I think you guys probably know that
Number
is the
3.
answer we're recommending.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what do we have next? Okay, so this is a fun one. I have had clients come to me, and also some like people when I've been, embedded in a marketing team, and I'm like, no, we don't send email to people who are opted out, and they're like, oh, but they absolutely want this even if they've opted out. So can we send it to them anyway? And I will most often put my foot down and say no. But the real question here is not like, can we send it to everyone who has opted out? Like physically, no. Um, Ashley, you're gonna love these in just a second. Sometimes they are the no answers on this exam as obvious as these examples. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you'll see some with our upcoming questions that are very similar, and I think you'll get a kick out of them. But so Pardot does have the ability to let you send email to opted out people. It's called an operational email. Sometimes, absolutely, yes, you do want to send things to people who are opted out. Most often the answer is no, but let's talk about like, how do you decide if you can even send it? So you need to see what they want to send. Or if you're like in the office and somebody's asking you to do this, like, what do they actually want to send? What is the email they want to send? And then you need to ask, does this qualify as an operational email? And I've linked out to it, but also in the next slides I've kind of itemized what is and is not eligible for an operational email. So let's take a look at this. So an operational email can be sent to people who are opted out if it has to do with critical system changes that require users to do something, shipping information and invoices, terms of service changes, order confirmations, system status notices like your system will be offline, blah, 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 legally required notifications. You can also send email to your colleagues internally to your company, like, I work for Extensus HR. I can send an email newsletter to my fellow colleagues using Pardot as an operational email because
Even
it's
if they
internal,
opted out.
even if they opted out. So what you cannot send is any sort of product update and improvement announcements. So you can't send to your opted out people, even if they're current subscribers. You can't be like, hey, our new tool is launching in 2 weeks. Join our webinar about it. You can't join. You can't send webinar invites. You can't send permission passes, holiday cards, big no-no. Can't send blog content updates, which I would categorize as a newsletter. Surveys is one that people
I'm
cannot seem.
underlying this.
Yeah. And event reminders, but surveys is one that seems to trip up questions from clients all the freaking time. So Becca, you have one where your client wanted to send, yes, sample. Client tells you their customer service team needs to notify customers of a planned outage. Can this email be sent as an operational email? Pick one. So Ashley, here's the yes and no's. Can you send it as an operational email? Yes, because it's an event reminder. No, because the admin doesn't trust the customer service team. Yes, because it is a system status notice. No, because it's not a transactional email like a shipping notice. The answer here is yes, because it is a system status notice. This is a planned outage. It's not sneaking in language about like, and by the way, buy our next upgrade. When you start sneaking that language in, that becomes a
Becomes
marketing
marketing.
email. But it is not an event reminder where we're like asking people to RSVP for an event, it is a system status notice, something that you are sending your customers, your subscribed customers. And I would argue that you're like legally obligated to inform them. The thing is that you need to cut off at the pass any requests to like, oh, an RSVP for our next event as an
The
inclusion in the footer of that.
the
Um,
rules for operational emails are very clear.
yes, and they
No
do get reviewed.
marketing. No marketing.
So you'll be able to like send your operational email, and it'll be able to go out with a link, but somebody will review it and they will send you nasty grams if it comes if it falls into the no list. Definitely have done that on accident. Didn't understand the survey thing as a client myself. Definitely got my hand slapped for that and got my ability to send operational emails revoked. So there
That's
are consequences.
because I was not your consultant.
This was before I knew. This was before I knew Pardot Consultants existed. This is how long ago
Yeah.
that was. So let's do another one.
So your client tells you they need help getting prospects to opt back in to their email newsletter. So they want to send an operational email inviting previously opted out people to get a free gift to resubscribe. Is this allowed? Yes, because it's not a survey, so it's okay to send. No, because it's not allowed to send gifts or subscription. Yes, because it's an offer that prospects will like. Or no, because it is not a transactional email like a shipping notice.
So the answer here is no.
Yep.
You're not allowed to send it because it's not a transactional email like a shipping notice. You can kind of see that it's like some gray things in the yes and no's in this though. And this is kind of designed on purpose because you will get tricky yes and no questions like this. You know, it's I don't care if you offer for a gift with subscription. Pardot doesn't either, but it's a marketing email. Therefore, you can't send it as an operational email. Simple as that.
Yep.
This is
This
Becca's
is
favorite one.
yeah, it is. Well, I have like two that are my favorite. Your client tells you they need to send post support case emails to ensure that their customers' problems are being solved and they're happy. They want to send a survey to everyone who logs a support case. That's transactional and operational, right? So, yes, because it's to follow up on a case that the customer initiated. Yes, because surveys are always considered transactional. Yes, because it's important for the client's CSAT score and we want the customers to be happy. Or no, because surveys are not considered transactional no matter what kind of spin you put on it. And this one is no. It doesn't matter that it was a case and that the survey has to do with the case and they just closed the case and you're just following up with the case. So it's transactional. It's
No.
not.
Any kind of
It's a
survey
survey.
is always considered a marketing email.
And this is based on a real
Yes.
customer. We kind of got into it. I won. Thank goodness, because I really didn't want them to get in trouble.
So this is also a very similar question to something I've encountered. Stood up Pardot and they're like, great. We have been in the history of sending, 300,000 emails at a time. They always drop on Tuesdays from our last marketing automation platform. We need to start again this coming Tuesday. So can you help me send this email to 200,000 people? Huge red flag. And there's lots of things that you want to consider before you agree to do that, especially if it's a brand new customer. But excuse me, but also if it's a customer who has never sent that quantity of email at one time before. So if you have a good history of sending those and you've been a long time Pardot customer, probably no problem. Go for it. But if you have not, let's look at the things that we want to think about. So really it comes down to, have they ever sent an email this large before? And I would say from Pardot. Because it doesn't matter that they sent this sort of email from their previous marketing automation platform. They've moved to Pardot. They have a new IP address. Hopefully with a quantity this size, they're on a dedicated IP. But if they have never sent this quantity of email from Pardot before, it's going to be a red flag to all of the spam and bot protection. It's just, it's going to blacklist. You're going to end up on so many blacklists if you suddenly start sending from a new IP address, an IP address that your email domain has never sent before, and you suddenly drop so many emails all at once.
So an idea might be to take that 200,000
yes,
and split it up. Do it
yes,
gradually, work your way back up.
and that's where IP warming comes in.
Yeah.
So this is a great thing to be like, we cannot send 200,000 all at once. We want to take that 200,000 and split it into increasing numbers so that over a week or 2 weeks, we're sending 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. We're slowly increasing the number to get up to the point where we can drop 200,000 at a time. And you need to continuously be sending that number. If you take a break for a month because somebody goes on vacation, you start over from the beginning. So you need to be able to commit to it. And it still is really a question too about, did they do their historical import from the other system? So if they're switching from another platform onto Pardot, you want to do the import of people who previously opted out, people who previously bounced from that other thing. Just because you had 200,000 people in that other platform doesn't mean that just importing them into Pardot, you can suddenly email them, they bounced, they opted out previously. You want to respect that across platforms. So this one's Becca's too.
We've got 300 email templates and need to change the link to our privacy statement in the footer. This just breaks my heart.
It absolutely happens.
It happens a lot.
And it might not be a
Especially
privacy. It might be like, I'm changing the
anything,
company name, might be branding, might
any
be
wording.
links to the new website that we're standing up. I want to change all my email templates.
Yeah. So there's not really anything that you can do for that instance, but you can future proof it. We've got two different solutions. One, I like to use Snippets. I go into Salesforce, create the snippet. I take that snippet, put it into the email. My whole email footer is snippets, except for the unsubscribe link. So I do like a pre-unsubscribe snippet and a post-unsubscribe snippet. So if anything changes, you just go into Salesforce, go into the snippet, make your change.
Yeah.
It
So
changes it in every email template.
your email footer like says the address of your company. Put the address in a snippet and then embed the snippet in the footer of every single one of your emails. And now you need to update your address because your office moved. You just need to go into the snippet, and the snippet will take care of, publishing the new address as soon as you start using emails with that new snippet in it, or
Yeah.
or that the updated snippet in it. It's awesome. It's the best thing you can do to future proof yourself.
And then Laura likes using dynamic content.
Yep.
Different alternative.
Yeah, different ways of getting to it. Snippets are newer, and they're tied to business units. Dynamic content, you can show different things based on a field value, or you can ignore that feature of it and just like everybody sees the same default value. Six of one, half a dozen of another.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah. So also with snippets, they rolled out. I have so many clients that don't use them. They're like, oh, we don't have that. Well, you don't have it because it's really in Salesforce. There's so many things that are moving out of the platform. It's its own object. It has page layouts. It has related lists. You have to make sure that the admin sets it up for you. You have to get permission to see it. You have to have the correct related lists on there. So it's you're gonna have to get the Salesforce admin involved if you're not the Salesforce admin. But I love snippets.
Yeah, they're great.
Much like me loving tags, which I know is a giant debate. I'm totally team tag, and I also am team snippet. So
So this gets to our previous question about I want to drop, 200,000 emails. So, your client's excited to get up and running with Pardot. They want to start out by sending a giant announcement to all 200,000 prospects at once. How do you recommend they proceed? Pick two. First, do IP warming, stagger the send across multiple days. Go ahead and schedule that email. There will be no problems. Don't bother with a suppression list. It isn't necessary. So hopefully, since we spent a good amount of time talking about IP warming and staggering your send, you know that the first two are the ones that you would want to do. Somewhat to Becca's earlier point, like what would Salesforce want you to say, or what would email best practices want you to say? Like think about that in evaluating these questions. Yeah. Let's go onwards.
features of Pardot's Lightning Email Builder. So I have this little, what would you call it, table that I created for myself. So that when I'm talking to a client and they're asking me, well, what's the difference between the new Lightning Email Builder and the classic builder? I kind of just go down my table and help them decide which one or both they want to use. So features of Pardot's Lightning Email Builder. It's accessible from the app launcher in Salesforce. It's that email content builder. It does require extra setup, whereas you'll see Classics just
Yeah.
works out of the box once you have your
Yes. So
domain
the
set up.
Lightning email builder lives in the Salesforce CMS, which requires setup. And it does mean that you need a full like Salesforce user license to get to these different things. You can't use Pardot gave us identity user licenses for people who just need access to the old pi.pardot.com classic interface.
But that only lets you
Those
get into Pardot.
Yeah. So to use the email like Lightning email builder, you do need a full Salesforce license, and it requires your admin to do a lot of the CMS setup steps with you.
The templates can be used for list emails and by salespeople for outreach. And then key thing here, once they are activated for automation, I totally would put that on the test if I was writing the consulting test. You can use them for autoresponders, engagement studio programs, and Salesforce Engage. They have to be
Yeah.
activated for automation.
So the way you might see a question around that might be like a client comes to you and says that they built their emails, but they can't find them in the templates. What would you do to troubleshoot? And you would look into the answer would be something around like, if they are built with the Lightning email builder, were they activated for automation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're trying to troubleshoot the Classic and they can't put it into Engagement Studio program because they didn't actually check that it's to be used by the Engagement Studio. It's the
It's
same
not
thing.
a template in Pardot's terminologies. Yeah.
So you can edit blocks of HTML in the Lightning Email Builder, but unlike Classic, you can't just go into the full source code and go crazy. You can add drag and drop components to the canvas, and it allows you to use content stored in the Salesforce CMS, which counts towards your total Salesforce usage. You don't have to use Salesforce CMS. You can have things stored in files, but then you have to go grab the URL for that file and put it in. And then Classic, it's accessible in Pardot from the email template section or send new list email in the draft section of the Pardot email tab. It works out of the box. You don't have to do anything crazy. You can use it for list emails, autoresponders, Engagement Studio emails, list sends, Salesforce Engage, which are your one-to-one emails. You can code
Full
if you
HTML.
love just coding the whole email, you can do that, but it does have templates. It's got the litmus preview testing available, whereas the Lightning Email Builder does not have litmus, but you do have to have an addition above growth. You can also A/B test in Classic. You cannot A/B test in Lightning Email Builder. And it does have more email merge fields available, at least last time I checked, but I feel like that's one of those things that they're just going to be adding more merge fields as we go until they're at parity. Oh, it also lets, see, I love Classic. It just could keep going. Allows use of custom email preference center. You can use snippets and dynamic content. You have the ability to lock regions and brand standards. And I think I have A/B testing on here twice. A/B
That is
testing is big.
important.
Yeah.
And when we say, the classic email builder allows you to use the custom email preference centers and things like that. So you can, in the Lightning email builder, you can grab the code for dynamic content and pop it into like a text section there. It's not as like drag and drop as
Right.
it can be in the classic email builder. They haven't, it's not at feature parity yet. So some pros and cons. You can make them work. It just requires some extra fine tuning manually. Questions, sample questions. These are fun.
The classic email builder is so 2022. Your client is ready to jump into Lightning Email Builder with both feet. What 3 things do they need to do first? So think prerequisite. So verify the Salesforce connector, upload content, and create an email template. Enable handlebars merge language, enable connected campaigns, and connect Pardot campaigns to Salesforce campaigns. Verify the Salesforce connector. Just enable it. You're ready to go. Create a segmentation list to use, create a CTA button in another tool like ClickMinded, and brush up on your HTML. So this one's kind of a trick question because you kind of have to do most of this. Except you don't have to create a CTA button in another tool because you can do it in the Lightning Email Builder. But the trick here is that what do you need to do first? It is a prerequisite to use the Lightning Email Builder to have handlebars merge language enabled. Connected campaigns have to be set up, and you do have to have your Salesforce connector verified. That would be the kind of tricky questions that I totally expect on this test.
Yeah, so we didn't spend a lot of time going into what's required to set up the email builder. There are help articles, there are how-tos about it, but absolutely understanding like what goes into setting it up, and then seeing a question like this on your test, very, very possible. So just because I'm not telling you explicitly something is or isn't on the test, don't stop your searching and your learning with us here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know Laura took her consulting exam after me, but I took mine in 2015. So when I have people ask me what's on the test,
Yeah.
we didn't even have Lightning Email Builder. There were no
Yes.
snippets. It's come so far. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, so Ben structured these so that like you get a whole section on like setting up things like, the back end settings of stuff, and that section in the exam guide will talk about like understanding multiple business units. Like as a consultant, you are expected to know these things, even if you have never had this tool as a Pardot customer. Like I have never worked for a company that had multiple business units in it, but there are definitely questions about multiple business units on the test. They would fall under like the administration section of your consultant exam. So side tangent.
Okay.
Your client is excited that her company has purchased Salesforce CMS and wants to use it to store her Pardot content. Without editing the HTML, which Pardot email builder allows you to use content stored in Salesforce CMS? Both email builders allow you to use content stored in Salesforce CMS. Only the classic email builder allows you to use content stored in the Salesforce CMS. The Lightning email builder allows you to use content stored in the Salesforce CMS, and if you don't have it, you have to locate the piece of content in Pardot files and copy the URL to use in your email. Neither. You have to use Pardot files, period. So the key part about this question is without editing the HTML, which Pardot email builder allows you to use content stored in Salesforce CMS? And you technically can get the link to it and pop it into classic email builder, but Lightning email builder really has like the drop down boxes and the like insert here section. So
And it
that's
really wants you to use CMS.
yes. So
It
that's where
actually makes it difficult to use Pardot files. So
yeah. So when we talk about like what is Salesforce, how does Salesforce want you to answer the question? C is really what it is.
yep.
They want you to be using the new hotness, right?
So your client is adamant about wanting to A/B test. Which email builder should she use? Only the classic email builder has A/B test baked into emails. Both email builders offer out-of-the-box A/B testing for list emails. Only the new Lightning email builder offers A/B testing, or neither Pardot email builder offers A/B testing. You'll need to get Marketing Cloud engagement. Clearly, that one that you toss out. This one is A. Only the classic email builder has A/B testing baked into emails. There are things that you can do if you want to A/B test. You can use Engagement Studio.
You can like build different lists and send them, but it's all very manual unless you're
Very
using the
manual.
classic email builder. So
Classic email builder makes it very easy.
and so Ben put a note about like these are sample questions. They should be used as an indicator, and the questions on the exam will undoubtedly be more complicated. So at the beginning of the session, I said you have like a paragraph worth of text to read through. We've eliminated that paragraph, and they're kind of just showing you like the nitty gritty. But usually a question like this would be like, a client has a long history of sending emails in nurture and newsletter style, and they've determined that they want to start testing more. Which email builder should they use to do A/B testing? Like, there's a whole slushy amount of extra text in there that you
Background.
don't need. Yeah. So yeah, expect to see some of that.
Or the answers will be longer, and 3 out of
All
4
of
of them
those
are
things.
very similar. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to take your pencil and you're like reading
Yeah.
every word.
So
It does
Lauren, you're
take a long
asking
time to
if
get through it.
there are decent practice exams for the consultant's exam. So there are, like, if you look for Jenna Mulvey's stuff, like she created some exams and quizzes and stuff a couple years ago. Everything is still relevant. Just the length of the questions, I don't think anybody can kind of accurately give you examples around those. And again, like Salesforce has a very scientific way of when people help them write questions. Um, they're very conscious about things like question, that the length of the answers should be similar. So on this one, item D is longer. It's an outlier. Give that a good look. You might be able to discard it just because it doesn't match, uh, the length of questions A or options A, B, and C. But they will test again, like, what is the best option here, not necessarily what would you do. So please keep it in mind.
Yeah, and I did just run through Focus on Force really quick, and there's not any Pardot stuff in there.
Yeah.
I love them, but
It's a very specialist, Pardot is a very niche thing. You do your best when you have hands-on, but if you have, for example, a HubSpot certification, there's a lot of similar concepts across different platforms. So don't be like, you must have hands-on Pardot experience. You'll be more successful with hands-on Pardot experience, but there's a lot of similarities across platforms. So one thing that I threw in here at the end is sometimes clients don't like the answers you're giving to them, and this is the hard part. Sometimes you have to give clients advice that they don't necessarily want to hear. They don't want to do what's in their best interest long term because they have pressures from above, or that sometimes someone above them gives them a mandate, like, I bought this list, you better email it. You can't, like, that's on them at a certain point. But adhering to best practices, like we've talked about through this exam, will always, do the client good in the long run. You'll get better open rates, you'll get better engagement, but that's not always what they want to hear. But sometimes it's what they need to hear. So let's look at what all we included here.
do
So
better.
again, I've kind of, people say, like, can you describe your job in an elevator pitch? And mine is generally, um, I help people send better email. And it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it really is, you send better email, you send email that your prospects want to receive, you get better results all across the board. You get better open rates, you get better inbox placement, not so many emails in the promotions tab, more of them in the inbox. You get more clicks on them. If you're cleaning your database, you are eliminating some of these tens of thousands of prospects that you've built up over time, but you're not, sending email out into the void. But when you send better email and send email that prospects want to receive, it really can mean that you send more email. So if they are filling out a form, send a autoresponder email after the form, and tell people, like, if you have gated content, you want to say, not download here. You want to tell people, provide your email address and we will send you an email with your download, right? And then when they submit it, you show them, like, thank you, check your email at, and then insert your email address that they just submitted, and say, check your email address at laura@pardotpro.com for your download. And then they have to go to your email, they have to click on it to get the item. You're not just giving it to them up front. This is, good behavior because people are moving the email to their inbox, they're clicking on it, and Gmail and all those other tools are listening to what people do with the email you send. It's being moved to the inbox. People are clicking on it. They actually want this email that's coming out of your domain and out of your IP address. So send better email, send email your prospects want to receive. When you have subscription pages, do your permission passes, which literally means tell them, subscribe on the thank you page, say, thank you, check for an email from us at newsletter subscription at company.com to confirm your subscription, right? So now they're looking and they know that they're expecting it.
And then another thing
Um,
that does is people could go to your website and you're just giving out your white papers for free.
yeah,
Um, but if you want to actually not just see what visitors are visiting and grabbing all your content, but you want to gate it and you get in return their email address that you can market to them, and then they get whatever it is that they wanted to download.
yeah.
So
And it
that's better also.
and getting back to like what do they want to receive? So your recipient list should be pretty dialed in, but it often means your suppression list should also be dialed in. So that gets back to the concept of, email frequency and recency dynamic lists, but also sit down and define, like, take an export of your Pardot database and like sort them by job title alphabetically and kind of scroll through and see what shit you have in there, because you're going to have those summer interns, you're going to have the accounts payable people, the accounts receivable people, the HR people. Unless those people are actually your target audience, set yourself up a suppression list that says, job titles include HR, job titles include AP, job titles include executive assistant, and put
Student.
those as part of your, yeah, unless you're a university like attracting students, but make those lists be part of your suppression list. So what I like to do is I like to create a master suppression list, um, and that master suppression list rolls up multiple other lists inside it. So I'll have a dynamic list of students. AP job title indicates AP, job title indicates legal, job title indicates HR, and all those job titles that don't relate to my offering, I'm going to roll them into my master suppression list. So now when I send an email, I don't have to add 15 suppression lists. I have to add one, maybe two. Um, so keep in mind that sending good email often means evaluating who you're sending it to and who you're not sending it to. You'll get more targeted emails, you'll get better interaction rates. Um, it's all good things, but customers don't necessarily like to hear that you're reducing the number of people you're emailing, because it sounds like a better number to say I'm emailing 20,000 people. Well, and you're like, well, I get like a 0.5% like click through rate. What if I'm emailing 5,000 people, but I get a 15% click through rate? Like, what are the better numbers here, right? Like, let's talk about quality over quantity. Um, and this gets back to something you will hear over and over again as consultants: clean your lists. And it gets back to the concept of, like, I stepped into a role in October and the customer's been using Salesforce since 2014. There are people in the database that, like, we still send emails to, but have never interacted with an email because they're probably not at this company anymore. So make it line items in your budget to clean your list, because companies go out of business. People get promoted and no longer do this thing. People change jobs and no longer work for this company. Companies get bought. Companies, you know people unfortunately pass away in seat. Like, it's a normal thing to have attrition in your list. If you're doing best practices, you're gaining people, but you're also eliminating people, and so your list is growing, just not at giant leaps and bounds, because you're cleaning as you go.
And
um
sometimes people will fill out a form just to get a piece of content from your website, and
yeah,
they never open an email ever again.
yeah.
So they just need
So
to go.
send email to your most engaged prospects. This is where I talked earlier about, let's create a subset of your subscription list. So you have your subscription list that people opted into. Here's my newsletter, and the list is maybe 60 people, 60,000 people on it. But when you look at the column in Pardot, every list, every segmentation and list in Pardot has a column that says like last activity date. If you sort by the last activity date, you may see that like only a small subset of those people have activity in the last 12 months. Those are the people you should be emailing. You shouldn't be emailing all 60,000 people. You should be emailing the subset of people who have been active in the last X amount of time. Look back. Um, so send email to your most engaged people and let them kind of opt out, and don't just keep spraying and praying to all 60,000 people, because that's an unrealistic number. And it only does your email reputation harm to keep sending that many. So yeah. Oh, here we
Oh.
included a bunch of links and references. So that really is the
Yeah.
content. Ben can help us distribute this list, or you can email us. Again, I'm Laura, Lara, at pardotpro.com. I'd be happy to forward slide decks to you all so you can click through them. But we have a bunch of emails from the Salesforce help and training sections about topics that we've talked about. Yeah, so we do have time to take some questions. I need to jump in a little bit here, but I will be happy to take some questions if anyone has them.
Just a bunch of thank yous.
If you have like a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll read them off. I think everybody's on mute.
Yeah.
But if you don't, that's fine. Or if you want to reach
Yeah.
out to them individually, feel free. Can you please send us a slide deck? Yes. So the recording, I'm going to send the recording once it's been uploaded to everybody, and it's also going to be on the Pardot Geeks blog, and that'll be updating as sessions happen.
Ben, what's our next session? Who do you have up next?
The next session is not next as in like immediately next, just for those that are wondering.
Next meeting.
Yeah, the next session is on the 20th, so in 5 days. That is with Brandon Walton and Jermaine Brewer from Cypress Learning Solutions. They're going to be doing covering the account configuration, and that's worth 20%. That's a big one.
So I think I mentioned like setting up multiple business units. Even if you've never done it, it's definitely going to be on your consultant exam. I think that's where that falls. So it's configuring
Lightning
like all parts. Yeah, and it's going to include too like topics that you may not have encountered as an end user. So even if your company never bought Engage, like Engage is going to show up on the exam as like 5% of your exam, and there's a whole session on Engage. I know.
Like the questions, like the topics are: articulate the implications and importance of a technical setup, develop a plan to maintain data integrity during data migration, and given a usage governance plan, develop and recommend a strategy that addresses organization and authorization or access. So it's the big ones. It's the
big session coming up.
So that's why it's for 20%, because it's, I'll just tell you, it's going to be business units, it's going to be marketing data sharing, it's going to be connected campaigns, it's going to be all that, all the roles, it's going to be Salesforce user sync, it's going to be all the
things.
the real things, the real technical things. So
and so where I would say like the specialist exam like tests you on like the most common features and like the lowest level plans. The consultant exam really does go into all those add-ons. So there will be sections on like B2B MA. So the consultant exam is a big one. It is tricky. It's full of long questions.
It's designed to be hard.
It's designed to be hard.
It's very frequently people don't pass it on the first try. Sometimes even the second try. It's tough. It's designed for people who are actively in the platform, and that's why it's hard to study for, because you can really, the best way to study for it is to be as competent as possible in the core functionality and what it can and can't do, what the art of the possible, I guess, as far as the core functionality, and also just being very familiar with the integration, like up to date with the integration and the particulars of it. This is obviously going to help. And then there was one that was done 2 years ago with the Pardot group in one of the Pardot groups in India. They did one as well, a boot camp. So I put the link here as well. Plus there's other stuff out there. So it's going to be a lot of learning what you can, and kind of, if you have to take the exam just to kind of get a sense for what's there, there's no shame in that, because you'll obviously that's the best way to know for real what to study for.
And so one thing I'll add too is that the Pardot consultant is probably not something that you want to take unless you are a consultant. And if you are a consultant, your company should be paying for these. And while your company may put a limit on like, we'll only pay for 3 attempts or something like that, that's all well and good, but you should take them up on that, because if you don't feel super prepared going in, the end results of a pass or a fail test is they'll tell you the sections and how well you did. So email marketing is worth 10% of the exam. They'll tell you like pass and fail on your sections. and you'll know what to study for. So for example,
Yeah.
I did not pass the Salesforce admin exam in my first attempt or my second attempt
Same.
because I bombed the reporting section.
Mhm.
But that summary of the exam told me how I did very poorly in the reporting section. So I knew
Yeah.
what I needed to study.
That is
So
such a
Yeah.
good addition. When I took the admin exam, well, even my first Pardot exam,
yeah,
that didn't exist. So I took my admin exam and I got a pass.
yeah,
Yeah.
Not even
The
confetti. I think so.
yeah. So
the
it's come
one
a long
thing,
way.
Yeah,
yeah,
Um,
and I will kind of add an addendum. So so I think you're okay to probably to have a go at the consultant exam if you've been an internal resource for
yes,
at
that's
least a
an
year.
excellent point. If you
Like
have
you like
hands-on and you've
if
been
you have
using
hands
it
on, you've
heavily,
been the internal SME. The only downside to that is that, and I'm Laura's seen it, I've seen it. When you're the SME somewhere, your experience with the platform is literally limited to whatever it is the company is doing.
that you do.
So if the
yeah,
company has not using business units, you're not going to use business units. You're not going to understand.
yeah,
You're going to know it. If they're not using the Lightning Builder, if they're not really using the campaigns terribly well, your knowledge is basically, unless you go proactively try to learn things, your day to days are going to be kind of limited to what they're doing. But if you've been a SME for at least a year, and you have a solid enough foundation, and you've passed the specialist, I think it's reasonable to at least
yeah,
prepare for the
absolutely.
consultant exam. Um, and you may not pass it the first time, but I think you're in a better place than someone who's coming in just fresh off the specialist. If you took the specialist and then are rolling in the consultant, it's going to be a rough time. It's going to
Yeah.
be
Well,
tough
one thing
because you're.
I will
Go
say
ahead.
is that like if you're a consultant and you took specialists and passed it with like you cleared it like really well,
Mm-hmm.
take your consultant exam sooner than you think because you might be more ready than you think you are. So don't be afraid. Like we're kind of telling you doom and gloom things. Like don't get me wrong. If you are a consultant and you recently passed the specialist, go ahead and sit your consultant. You'll at least learn things from it. But for an average user, consultant exam probably doesn't give you like a boost in your salary if you're an end user. So
Yeah.
just pros and cons. Uh, I do have to jump, but I'm happy to if somebody wants to reach out to me on Twitter or send me an email. Please do.
Same.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Well,
Finn,
thank
for
you so much for
organizing.
doing this. I put the
Pardot
link
forever.
to, yeah, I put the link in the chat to the next session. This is totally random, but Becca, I'm gonna have to do a shout out to Amanda Nielsen because you used her mug just now on this recording.
I don't know
Marketing
if y'all can see
Yes.
it.
attribution is fake. We literally made it up.
Yes.
Yep.
100%.
I saw that. I'm like, I recognize that. Yes,
Love
absolutely. So the
it.
next one is important. They're all important, but they're not really in order. It's kind of depending on people's availabilities, who can do what. So it's a little out of order, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter, generally speaking. So the next one is we got two other ones happening in March. This one with
Awesome.
Brandon, and then there is another one happening on the 29th. That's reporting metrics and analytics. That's another big one.
Yes.
That is with Jordan Krisman and Kara Clanton Pope.
Oh, Kara's a good one to lead with.
Yeah,
I'm glad
Kara.
you got
Yeah,
her.
she just went to Circante.
She was
Cool.
Pardot, old OG Pardot. She worked for Pardot for many years, so she'll
Yeah. No,
have
she was.
great.
She was around for quite a while. So she
Yeah.
definitely dyed in the wool, so to speak. Cool. Okay. Well,
Thank you,
thank you so
Ben.
much, and I'll take this recording, and it'll be up online and in the next day or two. So thank you again so much, and everybody, thanks for joining, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.